Hello. Okay, so I've been away for 10 months. I have not touched dice, cards, or I haven't played tabletop anything. I haven't played a board game. I haven't played a role-playing game. I haven't done anything except focus on my health and my family and my job. Did a little bit of video gaming with my brother and my oldest friend, just to pass the time on a few odd weekends. But aside from that, long break. But what I did do was reflect. I reflected on Dark Age of Man. I have not read Dark Age of Man since version 5.2. Anthony Boyd sent the edit that back with edit, and I was trying to get that to work. I could not see those edits, and I was working with Brian on that. And then, of course, I needed to take the break, so I actually have not read my rule book. I have not read our rule book, Dell and I's rule book on Dark Age of Man, for 10 months, right? I have not seen it. I got my computer up and running, and of course those documents are on this, as well as I have a printout that I printed out that I was going to proofread, and it went in one of the boxes that went into storage, which I'm going to go into this weekend and start digging out some of my favorite games and get back to enjoying my hobby, right? The thing I love. Okay. But what I did have time to do is just reflect, think about gaming, think about... I did do this over the last few months. I would log into, I'd go onto Amazon and just see what new RPGs had showed up there, see if there was anything interesting. I see Free League's published a bunch of stuff from Alien to Dune, I think Dune, and some other stuff. And I love Free League's system, Mutant Zero system, especially the Forbidden Lands game, dice pool system. And I saw some other... just a couple of other games I hadn't seen before. Sounds like they have interesting mechanics. I don't know, I've said it before, Dell and I, like anything, your ideas are only new for so long before other people dream up similar ideas, or before innovation only lasts until other people figure out. So I looked too also just to see whether there's been big changes, or whether what we're doing is now, being done by someone else, or if there's just something else there that makes us irrelevant. I didn't see it, but I also only looked on Amazon for what's out there. I know there's thousands of, or hundreds of games that have come out, I'm sure, in the last year on Drive-Thru RPG, etc. So it won't stop us from doing what we do, but I want to know whether there's any, I would like it to be, I'd like it to be a place for it, right? Okay, so anyway, neither here nor there. We're going to test play. So originally I wrote, so my original game that featured Dredgewater and Unglen was called Dragon Slayer, and it featured the D12 with simple character modifiers, and then of course you would have this reputation system that would expand as you played. That was more important than your ratings, because the reputation dictated in a way what level you were playing on. So let's say my modifiers of, say, +2 for my strength, that my strength never goes up, but my reputation would bring my strength relevant. So it was about relevance. So I could have a fighter with a +2 strength, but my reputation is 0 to 10 or whatever it is. And so you're dealing with a certain class of people doing certain class of things in the world. So your +2 is relevant to that. But let's say eventually I got 150 reputation score, and now I might be the man-at-arms for the king, and so I'm dealing with much greater things, and my +2 strength is still +2 strength, but it's all relevant to the context, to the world context, as opposed to D&D where you become godlike, so to speak, right? So what really changed was your role in society, etc. But it was fantasy. It wasn't really... and again, those ideas hadn't been fully fleshed out. We play tested that on Roleplay Cafe a couple of years ago with Mark, and it was great fun, and I got great feedback from Mark there, especially about my experience system, because I had zero inclination to cap it, right? So you knew that 0 to 10 was something, or your experience could just grow as your reputation just grew. So you could conceivably have a character survive for a campaign and might have 1,000 reputation points just scored. You just accumulate score. Well, at some point, what does that mean, right? It's all relative. So the game hadn't been very well thought out outside of, I wanted to keep the number simple, D12 small. So Dell was just telling me he wants to kind of get back to D12. Fantastic, which means we've got to modify our math. We're going to have to watch how much we have to identify and narrow how many bonuses can exist. And honestly, I have not read Dark Age of Man. We were on version 5.2 when I left, when I took my hiatus. I have not read it in probably 10 months, 2 weeks. Whenever I read, I tried to get those edits to show up in the document. I could not get it to. I got frustrated, and so I still have not seen Anthony's notes on what we need to work on. So you can imagine how frustrated I was. I could not get it to work. So, and then of course I left. So Brian was kind of left hanging the bag there, holding the bag there. So we'll get all this stuff ironed out. So anyway, we're gonna play, or I'm gonna play. He's gonna be the presenter in our game, and we're gonna go back to the simpler D12 formula, which is gonna be interesting. Okay, but anyway, that's not why I meant to make this video. I wanted to talk about something I was thinking about, and I'm sure we talked about this before. I'm sure many people in the community have talked about this. But I was thinking about I was catching up on an old video over at CGA. He's not CGA anymore. He's not Complex Games Apologist any longer. He's got a new title, and I can't think of what it is now. I know him as CGA, but and he was talking about the OSR, and in listening to that video, and this video is a year old, so I'm kind of out of context to what he said there, but it brought up something I was thinking about, this idea of the people writing OSR primers and what it is to play an OSR and how do you play an OSR. All of these kind of rules for what, how do you play them and what's expected of you. Kind of, I've never read a primer. I think I own Chris Gonerman's old school primer. I just bought it as part of the collection of all the basic fantasy books, but I never looked at it because I'm an old school guy. I basically play the way I want to play, and his books, his basic fantasy in particular, I didn't have to tweak, right? It's like, and we just played it. But I guarantee you, I played it differently than Chris Gonerman probably, and vice versa, right? So I was thinking, I mean, out in the thumbprint or the fingerprint that is my style of GMing. But I was watching that and it hit me. It reminded me, how game system's important. We talk about game system for years, right? It dictates a particular style of play, and it should. They're trying to. There's an intent to game style or game mechanics that attempt to impart a different experience at the table, or they want you to achieve a particular style or feel at the table with a particular set of rules, and so all that makes sense. But in direct relationship to, say, the OSR, it struck me, more important than the game system is the GM, because every GM is different. And I was thinking, how could I explain this? I was reflecting back on Lee, when Lee ran Conan, the adventure game, for us, and Antoine, Complex Games Apologist, ran Conan for us. Exact same 2D20 system, but modifius, brilliant game, and they ran the same system, followed the rules, but how they do it, completely different experience. I won't say completely different, both great experiences, but you can't deny who's running the game always influences the feel of a game. So there are people who love to play with me. They like the way I do things. They like the way I am with the rules. They like the way I'm whatever. And then there's people, I'm sure, that have played with me, just hated the way I did it, or didn't like that I didn't adhere to something, or whatever the case may be. Every GM can't help themselves. Despite game mechanics, we're going to present or have a particular way about how we do it, right? And I thought that's kind of something that really the OSR, when you write an OSR guide or OSR primer for players, or what do you expect, or what is OSR, what does it mean to play an old school game, it's ironic because when it comes right down to it, especially in D20, I think GMs have a greater effect, DMs have a greater effect on the D20 game than, say, Lee Rimmer could have on the 2D20 Conan system. So Lee could flat ignore it, not play it right, ignore the rules, do it wrong. But the system is it's such a way that how Lee presented the game and executed the game could be utterly unique to Antoine, the way he does it, but it's going to have a particular rule set that confines that space when it comes to rulings and etc. the D20 is utterly, almost completely going to reflect the personality of the GM or the players, but certainly the GM, right? And this would explain why you can be confused. You can say, hey, I want to play D&D, and you go over to Rob's house, and you play with Rob, and they do a dungeon crawl that's very strict. You're measuring out the turn, how much you can move per turn, and how you're going to handle the torch, and how you're going to handle. And then you might sit down at a table with me, and we're going to do broad movement narration, where you say, I want to, I might narrate, yeah, it's about 150 feet down this corridor, and they don't feel so confined to 10-foot movements. Or I might say, yeah, as long as you got a torch, we're good to go. I'm not going to be anal about, checking your torch. I might tell them before a game that I'm going to roll random die on every turn to see if your torch stays lit, so we don't have to tick time on your torch. But then they don't have control of their resources that way, and there'll be players that go, screw you, man, I really want to control those resources. So homebrews, of course, achieve this, but I mean, just how a GM at the table plays, presents, etc. And I thought, old school primers, that's one of the things they can't really explain. You can read a primer. A guy comes to my table to sit down to play, and he's read a primer on old school gaming, and he doesn't get that exact thing for me. And he might come away going, man, I love the way this old school stuff works. It turns out, but that's not how two other guys run old school games, so OSR games. But it struck me, I wanted to speak to that. I don't know why, it just struck me that, boy, I wish I had been around a year, 10 months ago. I would have been able to put my 2 cents in about that. Pretty cool video. And I think, Antoine, it's an eloquent video. It's well handled, and it's just a great video. But I was thinking, we can't deny how the players impact the table. We certainly cannot deny how the individual that's playing, the DM, GM, referee, whatever you want to use, affects the game and the table. I found out after coming back the first time 15 years ago, or 12 years ago, whenever I first came to YouTube, and I talked about my background in Moldvay, old D&D, and how I ran it, and that's all I ever did for our childhood. I didn't play much, and I ran it a particular way, and very often homebrewed and threw out rules, and everybody seemed to acknowledge that was a kind of a universal feeling, right? Especially among the GMs. But it was interesting how people who then assumed when they came to my table that it would feel just like the game they played with their buddy back in the day, and they would say, well, that's not really D&D, or that's not really old school. Right. They made an assumption based on what they thought D&D was. And there's been this ad infinitum. There's been this conversation ad infinitum. What is D&D, right? And I think it's a valid argument. I think game system matters, but any game system, in a game system in my hands, Peace, for instance, how I operated and kind of narrated and ran Peace, certainly different than how Robert, the narrator, GMs and runs Peace. The game system works no matter how well, no matter what we do as individuals, no matter how I present narrative, no matter how I ask them to respond, or no matter how I put in front of them the challenge so they can decide to roll dice, whatever, and how we prompt each other, it's different. It's different. So I thought that's something we probably need to be aware of in Dark Age of Man. I guess I'm kind of circling around here, because Dark Age of Man, we want to be very low system. We want it to be almost invisible. I've said before, invisible, almost an invisible system. Everybody kind of intuitively understands what the range of numbers is. They understand what hard and easy, and they kind of understand how their modifiers can impact them, and how their tools can impact the modifiers, etc. Very, very simple. And when you say to them, when they announce, they declare what their character's doing, not asking, not can I, not mother may I, but declaring. Or like me, I'm IC, so I play IC even in old school. I try to be IC. I don't generally say to Todd and Joth, can I pick the lock? I describe how I'm going up and I'm fumbling around the lock, and I'm gonna try to pick this lock. I am telling him, I'm narrating my character's picking the lock, or stand aside, I'm going to pick the lock, and that should cue Todd that, make a lockpick check if you're a thief, so to speak, right? I wouldn't do it if it's a cleric. But Donnie, same way. She didn't declare that she was casting healing. She would pray, and she would invoke and cue me that she was using cure light wounds, right? So in-character play versus a guy who says, I'm going to use Cure Light Wounds here. Doesn't matter. It's both legal. It's both valid. It's both great gaming. Doesn't matter how you present it. But in our game, we want people to be able to declare, well, I'm going to kick the door into the tavern and I want to pitch the torch in and try to set the, I'm going to set this, they can, in part, that their goal is to set alight the tavern. Hopefully they'd say, I'm going to take a torch, kick the door into the tavern, and pitch the torch into the center of the tavern, and that would cue the GM. He's trying to light the tavern on fire. That would be a, I might say, okay, that's going to be a body check minus your luck, or we're going to go ahead and do a luck check minus your body, right? Because you got to kick the door in and pitch this thing in, and that will determine whether you achieve the actual burning of the setting alight the tavern. Kicking the door in, you won't fail, but whether it lights the tavern on fire, might take some luck to get everything just right to catch the tavern floor on fire, so to speak. But I don't have to explain that to him so much as, make a luck check modified by your body score, right? So if their body's, so the luck check, instead of using luck, he uses body. Well, my body's a 1, so add 1 to your luck check instead of your luck, because you got to kick the door in, and then, but it will be a luck check modified by your body, Totally free to do that, and that's what makes our game interesting. Every GM is going to have that fingerprint, but that GM may decide, hey, this is a luck roll that is all about your, prestige. It's not about your luck, but it's really trusting the fates. But your prestige is what's going to maybe affect the fates, right? As opposed to always your luck score, right, or whatever. So. That's kind of the goal, that players can play kind of however they play. They can use the speech that best suits them to communicate with the GM what they're trying to achieve, and then simple dice checks, which can be communicated by the GM. Dell and I almost want to get in a way where a player in character says what they say, and the GM responds with, "We'll make the check," or the GM responds with, "This is going to be tough for you," and that cues you to roll the die, or kind of a very invisible system that's flowing, right? And there is nothing really out of, obviously anybody who says, well, I'm going to fly to the top level, and they don't have, this is grounded in a fictional Dark Ages England, well, how are you going to physically fly? Those problems have always arisen when you play with somebody who says, well, I want to do this thing, and you're like, wait a minute, there's certain things you can't do, that they don't fall into the fiction, they don't fall into our aesthetic, they don't fall into our culture of play, and you might have to explain that to them. But in our game, it's conceivable. You could argue through prayer, a miracle will occur that would allow you to leap from that somehow, some way, right? And it would be magic. Or in our game, we don't necessarily refer to it as magic. They're more like supernatural or whatever, right? So it's not in the rules, so it wouldn't be utterly impossible. It would probably affect the flavor of what we're doing, depending on the nature of the fiction, right? The nature of the thing we're in. That suddenly somebody's kind of levitating to the second floor of the tavern to rescue the princess, right? So those are things that do we want to define those in the rules, or do we assume the people who would play our game have some understanding of these things? I will not over-define things in the rules. I don't want a 600-page rule book. I just won't do it. That's between the table. Anyway, and who am I to tell the guy who buys my game that in his world he wants Joe to be able to dream up a miracle where he can make a very, very tough roll and a nigh impossible check to suddenly be empowered by the gods to leap to the second, right? Okay, so that's the other thing. We're not going to direct whether somebody doesn't have a game that's that crazy or that high fantasy if they wanted to, right? Anyway, just want to chat. I haven't been around for 10 months. Literally, everything went in the box. My computer went in the box. That's why I didn't communicate at all, hardly. Checked my email once in a great while on my wife's laptop to make sure there wasn't something I had to deal with. Dell and I exchanged Christmas cards, but I didn't really talk to Dell much. I didn't talk to anybody, so it definitely wasn't personal for anyone. This was me needing a break for a number of reasons. But meanwhile, I got a lot of stuff I still hope to contribute in future to not only our hobby, but just to enjoying sharing games and ideas. So anyway, everybody out there have a great 4th of July. Dell and I will be playing Saturday evening. Hopefully we'll be joined by at least 1, 2, 3 other people. Depends if they want to join us for Dark Age of playtest. Dark Age of Man playtest, so I'm looking forward to that. I have not played anything in 10 months, 11 months. I think the last thing I played was 4 Against Darkness here on the channel, and I missed that. Holy cow. It's another thing. I was thinking about what I was loving and what I missed the most. I loved our football league. I missed that a lot. I loved all of our role-playing. And, you know, in 10 years, I have not had a bad experience as a player or a GM role-playing with anyone in the community or even locally. I've just been blessed for 10 years. It's great role-playing. And, of course, so I miss that daily. And then discovering 4 Against Darkness, and then adding my little overland travel rules for how they would travel across my world, Broadland, and how that would trigger things, and then we would get into the dungeon delving of the actual rules of 4 Against Darkness. My God, that was fun. And I have put all that in storage, and I haven't been able to find my 4 Against Darkness, is the gist of what I was going to say. I went out a couple days ago looking for 4 Against Darkness in my storage, and I could not find 4 Against Darkness. So I'm a little bit irritated because of the things I missed the most when I took my break. I really missed the football league, which I'm not planning on doing again. I may play football, but I won't do it in a league. I really miss role playing, of course, GMing and playing, and that's a given. And then 4 Against Darkness, of all the tabletop stuff I'd been fooling with, I really got hooked, and I loved it, and I can't find it. It's cheap. I can always replace it, but it'd be nice to be able to find my notebooks. I mean, I had those characters. I have my wherever my Broadland world map is, that's original, hand-drawn. My wife did that. If I don't have that, if I can't find 4 Against Darkness, I'm not going to find my Broadland map, so it's strange for me. I mean, even when I left the last time, took a hiatus last time for, I don't know, it was like 8 months or something. I took a break last time. And I still played locally. I mean, I was still running Sword and Wizardry. I was still running the Broadlands. I was still using my Island of Sewell world that I created for White Box, fantastic medieval adventure. So I was still doing stuff locally. This time I did nothing at all in any way. And it was kind of interesting. I needed the break. I didn't realize how tired and how burned I was. And I'd let my health go. I suffered some injuries and just a ton of stuff, and flat out burned out. So I'm going to pace myself this time, but I am going to contribute, and I want to be. I'm going to spend that energy on role playing. I will enjoy some tabletop sports games just for me, my football or whatever I play. But I ran a campaign. Technically, I was running, in a way, a role-playing campaign, but it involved 12 humans that owned teams, drafted, and then we'd run their games. But it was technically an 12 months, 11 months, 12 months. It was basically a 12-month role-playing game campaign. It's just instead of sitting down and role-playing and they would go on adventures, I would have to play through every game every season, and then we would, have our playoffs, and then we would draft, and they would trade. But it really was like an epic role-playing game that never ended for me. I was playing. Whenever I had time, I'd play in the mornings. I'd go to work. I'd come home at lunch, play a game, because I had to play so many games a day to get through a week, and then I'd have to play so many weeks to get through the season, and then we'd have the playoffs, and then we'd have to start all over again. And so it was really like a role-playing game that went every day. But I was the one doing everything. So you can imagine how much I loved it, or I would not have done it. So there's not complaints. I absolutely loved it. It kind of became all-consuming for me, and so you can see why it led to some burnout. But my point is, I would like to put that energy into role-playing. I'd like to put that energy into GMing, maybe some OSR, maybe some Dark Age of Man. But I will say this too. In having 10 months off, you have a chance to reflect on what's important to you, especially when you dealt with, I don't know how many of you remember, I had the heart event shortly before I left. I had the SVT. They had to stop my heart to save my life. And you're faced in the emergency room with kind of mortality when you're thinking, how am I gonna live through this, and what's going on? And of course you're a little scared, and you start to think about, if this is my last day on earth, what the hell's important to me, and what have I been doing, and what do I want to do more of, and those kind of things. You start to, and then of course I've got two parents that are declining. And this has been difficult for me, as it is for all people who, we all, well, if we have parents or important people in our lives that are caretakers or guardians, you know, you're going to go through this, and you're instantly put, there's like an instant shrinking and a kind of a focus that goes into your life as you recognize these things, and so you have time to reflect on, you know, if when this is all worked out, or when I'm able to leave this job I don't like, or whatever it is, you know, because people go through this, right? You know, they make pacts, right? By God, if I can get out of this job, I will never do that again, and I will spend every weekend doing this because I haven't had a weekend off in 10 years, you know, whatever it is, right? I've been working nights for 10 years, and I'm so fed up with nights that I'm going to go back to role-playing, damn it, because I haven't been able to play with people because I work nights, you know. So this is what people do, and you begin to recognize what you want, what you miss, and if you get a chance, you're going to fix it. You're going to take charge of it. So in creating my own games, tabletop games, but also creating our own role-playing game, Dell and I, recognizing that I'll play anything, and I've always said this. I've always said I'm wide open to try games. I love to play all kinds of different genres, different kinds of games. Less inclined to GM them because you gotta learn them, and you gotta buy them, and you gotta. But this last 10 months, I said to myself, it will be fantasy, and it will be OSR or old D&D. It will be, and when I say old, I don't mean the original white box old ODD. I mean Dungeons and Dragons, Moldvay, Basic, or Holmes D&D. But most likely, I'll just stick with an OSR that anybody can play, anybody can get their hands on, everybody can understand, and it will be OSR. I will GM mostly OSR. And then I'll play, like I said. Anybody who wants me to be a part of something or wants me to play, you know, of course, I'm game. I love to role play. I found out, having a chance when I came to YouTube to get a chance to play, that I actually really enjoyed it. I never believed I would, because I'd been a DM most of my life. And not only did I enjoy it, that I found that it allowed me to tap a particular creative depth as a character that I couldn't quite do as a GM. As a GM, you can kind of get into character, and you can play all kinds of different NPCs and characters, but you're so busy administrating the game, you're so busy with all the stuff that may come up and all the rules and the books and the what-ifs, and you're dealing with, say, 5 people or 3 people and what they're doing. But as a player, you really get to just sink into that character, enjoy your party mates, enjoy your table mates, and kind of just have fun, right? So I've been so looking forward to coming back for role playing. But I had a chance to say, if I were to die, if I weren't gonna live to be 53 or 54 years old, how bad do I want to play D&D Moldvay, or how bad do I want to make sure my last role-playing game ever as a GM at the table is fantasy D20 OSR, right? It's where my heart is at. It's where I really truly am in a comfortable space, and I really enjoy it, and I always have, right? I always have. I mean, like most of us, we all have a thing for Star Trek or Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. We all have our favorite books or our favorite. I mean, I really enjoy Star Wars and really enjoy Star Trek. Those things are important to me. But when it came to coming to the table, 99% of the time it was dark, low fantasy Dungeons and Dragons in a broad general kind of world, you know, because D&D was in a way a broad generalization of fantasy, and we could do anything we wanted, so to speak. And then the other big one was Top Secret, which is kind of strange, but Top Secret was fantastic. It was at an age in my life where I loved the James Bond movies as a kid, and I was reading the Executioner books by the Mac Bolan books. So Top Secret as a kid was like, it was either we're gonna do D&D and that old thing, or man, it's gonna be this badass secret agent James Bond stuff via the original Top Secret. And then we even got into James Bond at one point. We were pretty busy then, and didn't have as much time to really embrace the James Bond system. I can't even recall how that system works, but anyway, I've rambled. It's clear I've been away. It's clear I've wanted to talk to somebody. So anyway, everybody out there, you have a great 4th of July.